Well, I suppose the EFF's response to Xoli Mngambi's decision was hardly unsurprising, Xoli Mngambi. We can get to the EFF in just a moment, but you were at the briefing this morning, so let's rewind if we can. There was a lot of hype about who it was going to be, but I think the smart money was always going to be on Julius Malema. How did this play out today?
Well, Jeremy, I think as speculated, I remember doing a crossing with the colleagues in the morning, Uveka, and threw in a couple of names in there, but there was one person in my mind, and luckily I'd done some research overnight about this case that would have taken place some time ago. Remember, the case against Julius Malema, Jeremy, would have been struck off the court roll in August of 2015, and at that time the judge, very frustrated that the prosecution was the one that was not ready to prosecute. Yes, there was this element among one of Malema's co-accused, Xoli, who apparently had been sick, and I think the assertion at that time was that he was suffering from depression. So Julius, at that time, very desperate for this case to go ahead, he even suggested that, look, why don't you try me separately from my co-accused if this sickness of this man is going to hold me back. So essentially this case is about exactly that this is the case that was struck off the roll, but the judge very clear, Jeremy, that this was not an acquittal, and subsequent to that day, the NPA commenting and saying that they may bring a certificate to reinstate the matter. Of course, AfriForum saying 2 years and 8 months have now lapsed. Why hasn't this case been taken back to court? And that's when...
So conceivably this could also be a ploy just to put pressure on the NPA to issue that certificate.
It absolutely is. That is what the NPA is arguing. That
but AfriForum is ready to go ahead anyway.
Indeed. They're very clear that this has taken too long to get to court. Why? And if you listen carefully to Xoli Mngambi, he says, suddenly now they are told about a review before this matter is taken back to court. And that is what I think worries the NPA, the AfriForum the most, that why the review? So the NPA is saying, look, the review comes about as a result of the prosecution team that was heading this matter back then. That team has since been disbanded. And so on that day of their disbandment, a new prosecution team was brought on board, and it has been therefore familiarizing itself with this case, and a decision will come at the on or before August, before month-end August, on whether or not the NPA will prosecute or not. Because remember, Jeremy, the prosecuting authority says they will not pursue a case where the case is not winnable.
Is this what the NPA has said previously, or is this in response today to what AfriForum has brought?
It's in response to today, Jeremy, that the AfriForum is saying, please give us a certificate of non-prosecution if you're not going to pursue this case, and we are happy to run along with it or to run ahead with it. And the NPA is saying, look, we are not going to be pressured by AfriForum. We are going to take our time because we need to get our ducks in the row. Our team is familiarizing themselves with this case. The matter is under consideration. We are not going to succumb to pressure, but at the same time, we cannot give a response as to whether or not we think there are reasonable prospects to win or not, because we still need to get to do our homework.
Did anyone push Xoli Mngambi on this assertion that the NPA is protecting certain parties?
Say that again, Jeremy.
So Xoli Mngambi, we've just played the soundbite, and perhaps we can pull it up again if the team behind you can find it, suggesting that the reason why this prosecution has been such a long time coming is that the NPA have been protecting certain interests, hence their reluctance to push forward with the process. I'll hear in just a moment if we can find it, but see if you can navigate your way around that one.
Yes, indeed. Look, that question did arise. In fact, it came as a result of Kali Creel, the CEO of AfriForum, saying that there does seem to be some kind of sheltering of certain individuals from prosecution, and they are more concerned now, given that one of the co-accused, alongside Julius Malema, Xoli, is apparently seen posting pictures where he's posing with our president, Cyril Ramaphosa. He's seen also driving in fancy, powerful cars, whilst at the same time, you have Julius Malema cozying up with the ANC. There is talk, they're saying, there's talk to bring Julius Malema back into the ANC. So they are very clear that it does appear to them that there is some kind of political consideration, and that is why this case is not moving.
All right, let's take a listen again, or a look again at exactly what Xoli Mngambi said in that respect, and we can talk about it a bit more.
We've made it clear all along, and it's the law, that you can only get involved in those matters where the NPA decided not to prosecute. It's not a parallel prosecution stream. We cannot elect our cases. We can only deal with cases once the NPA has decided not to prosecute. So I've challenged people along, and I hate the word challenge, but I have, to indicate which of the matters we've overseen and not dealt with, and why we've elected these matters. So it's open there, and it's a challenge to the public. Indicate to us those matters where the NPA decided not to prosecute, where we have decided not to intervene. These are the matters where people are sheltered from prosecution. These are the matters available to us to deal with at this stage. And therefore, you can only have one mandate, and that is to deal with matters where people are sheltered against prosecutions. If I look at the matter, and I look at the facts up until now, I look at the time that lapsed, the only argument I could think of is that there must be some reason why the NPA decided not to. And this particular reason, it could be political of nature, because somewhere, if they're not prosecuted, and if there's a review of this prosecution, there's certainly some shelter against prosecution, and that's what we're all about. We said we focus on people that are sheltered against prosecution because of their political connection and or just because of who they are and who they're connected with. And certainly, I cannot see from the facts of the matter and from what I've heard and from what I've read from Mr. Pretorius' response that there's any other reason.
That's a fairly powerful statement, but also, just listening to it again, it's also based on conjecture. He's suggesting this could be the case. I mean, he would have to back that up with hard facts.
He would have to back it up, Jeremy, because also just using, I guess, what many would call common sense, why would the ANC feel the need to shelter Julius Malema from prosecution? Because remember, Julius Malema leads one of the opposition
parties. Well, that's exactly the question I was going to ask. Yeah.
So it becomes almost a no-brainer that the ANC would do that. But then again, I mean, I guess what worries them is this relationship, this cozying up. I'm talking to you about that. There seem to be these calls from the ANC side to say, come back home, prodigal son, and of course, those of you that left us.
All right, so I'm not exactly sure of the timeline, but I think it was during the briefing, once Julius Malema's name had been put into the foreground, that he came out with instant response, essentially saying, bring it on. That was the first thing, and he has said that in the past, but also suggesting, and it's also the subject of our daily poll question today, that this could be a deflective strategy to draw attention away from the land expropriation without compensation debate.
Indeed. In fact, I put that question to Carly Creel, that the EFF is going to say this is all in an effort to try and thwart their messaging around land expropriation without compensation. What are you going to say in response to that? He says, well, it's always the case when people are faced with answering for their misdemeanors. They will try and deflect attention, but we're not going to be sidetracked by that. We are very clear. This has got to do with taxpayers' money that has been used irregularly to benefit certain individuals corruptly so. And if Julius Malema is among those, then he has got to go to court to answer for that. And very interestingly, Jeremy, what we also discovered today, because we had to go to the NPA to find out, okay, so why are you sitting on your hands on this matter? 2 years, 8 months on, why aren't you prosecuting? NPA spokesperson says to us, look, our team, a new team, is considering this matter and they familiarizing themselves, but the important thing is that by month end August, we should be clear as to where we're going. We're either prosecuting or not prosecuting. Then an issue comes up around President Jacob Zuma's son, Tutuzane, because remember, there is a case, or there was a case against him of culpable homicide relating to Phumzile Dube, who died in an accident where Tutuzane was involved. It then comes about, Jeremy, that Duduzane was offered an opportunity, because this is revealed by Kari Creel. They gave us an update of certain of the cases that they're following. He says, so the NPA has decided to give Duduzane Zuma an opportunity to make representations to them on this particular matter.
Which he has failed to do.
Which he has failed to do. Apparently was given 2 months. It was the month of February and March. Month and March being the deadline. He's missed that. Today, therefore, Luvuyo Mfako saying to us that on review of this matter by the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Sean Abrams, Mr. Duduzane Zuma will now be prosecuted.
Just finally, am I correct in saying that there's also a bit of pressure on Gerrie Nel to implement at some point a successful private prosecution? Given that I think it's now a year or so since he's been with AfriForum, I'm racking my brains as I'm talking to see whether anything has successfully passed through the passage of the court. I tend to think not.
No, no, Jeremy. And I'm pretty confident that it's actually it's a resounding no, because
It's about as emphatic as you can get, yeah.
The only case that they're likely to take to court now, Jeremy, is on the 10th of May, and it relates to Gabriella Engels. Remember her?
Indeed.
The one who was assaulted by former First Lady in Zimbabwe, Grace Mugabe. That's the case. I think that will probably be the first test case that AfriForum does take to court, led by Gerrie Nel and their prosecuting arm of that particular institution.